What is up, fight nerds and dirty gamblers? I am Erik, and this is Erik Bets Fights. It is fight week, y'all. It's always fight week lately, but we're not going to complain about that, are we? Of course not. No, we've got UFC 272 grudge match between Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal coming up this Saturday. It's Tuesday today. I'm already done with my tape study. Usually I don't get this video out till like Friday, but it turns out I have Mondays off work now, so I can spend all day Monday. I have done so much research on this card, you guys. It's ridiculous. I did tape study all day Sunday and all day Monday. And then I've also been working on my notes and reading and various different kinds of research for probably about 4 hours today as well. I'll still be doing more research throughout the week, so I may have more bets that I end up adding. But since I do have my tape study done, I wanted to go ahead and get this video out anyway. We are going to start with a super quick recap of how our bets went for UFC Fight Night Green versus Islam Makhachev. I'm going to just do that real quick. I'm not going to go through each fight on the card. I'm just going to go through the bets because I know y'all are here to listen to the breakdowns for 272, so we don't want to waste too much time. Green versus Makhachev was a very tiny losing event for us. We lost minus 0.18 units, so literally like less than 0.2 of a unit. So, hey, if you're going to lose, at least that's not a bad loss to have. But let's go through those bets. We had 1.5 units on Ji Yeon Kim versus Priscilla Cachoeira. That one didn't hit. Obviously, it was a pretty bunk decision. If you look at MMAdecisions.com, I think everybody on there had it for Ji Yeon Kim. You know, most people on Twitter and everything seem to think that it was a bit of a robbery. I don't know if I'd say it was a robbery. It was a close fight, but I would have scored the fight for Kim personally. So it would have been a winning event for us if we just had that bounce go in our direction, but that's how it goes sometimes. That's all right. We did have 1 unit on Ramona Pascual as an underdog at plus 185. That didn't hit. You know, I still think it was a winnable fight for her, but, her first time in there. And, if she had looked to push the wrestling a little more, I think that it probably was a winnable fight. But whatever. We took a shot on an underdog, and it didn't happen. That's what we get. And then we had 2 units on Terrence McKinney at plus 110. I believe that was the first bet I placed on this card. After doing the tape study for that fight, I actually expected to find Terrence McKinney as a small favorite. I was thinking I was going to see Terrence McKinney at like minus 150 or so. So when I saw him as a small underdog, I had to pounce on that. The fight played out perfectly. I mean, he looked like a big favorite. He was completely dominant. So, yeah, I didn't really understand why he wasn't being favored in that spot, but we took advantage and it worked out for us. So picked up 2.2 units there. Now on to the props and parlays. We had a parlay of Arman Sarukian and Gregory Robocop Rodriguez. That one lost because Rodriguez did lose the decision there. That was another spot where it was a little bit of an unlucky bounce. You know, I think Rodriguez probably could have been given the nod there, and then we would have picked up 1.3 units, but lost that one. And then we also had a parlay of Ramiz Brahimaj and Jonathan Martinez. We had 2 units on that one because I was pretty confident in that. That one did hit. And then we had half unit on Robocop Rodriguez to win by submission at plus 325. That one, of course, lost. So looking at minus 0.18 units overall. It's okay. It was a small loss. The last 2 events before that were pretty big winning events for us. We're still sitting at about 55 units of profit total at about 25% ROI. If you look at overall since we started tracking in October 2021. You can always find my bets at betmma.tips/erikblock. That's ERIKBLOCK. My bets will always be free and will always be posted there. Anyway, that's enough for the recap because we are here to talk about UFC 272. We are going to go through every fight on this card, break it down a little bit, talk about what some good bets might be for each fight, and then we will also take a look at the bets that I've placed so far. And like I said, I probably will be placing more bets as well. This is going to be a tough card to break down because, it's tough to break down a card if you haven't done enough research. I think it's equally tough to break down a card if you've done too much research because I have like 10 plus pages of notes typed out on these fights. And when I have that much information and that much in my notes, I can't remember all my talking points. So you'll have to forgive me as I'm going to be kind of looking at my notes here so I can remember what the heck I was going to say about each fight as we go. But we're going to start at the top of the card, folks. The main event, Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal. Obviously, the big grudge match. These guys used to be homies. I believe they even used to live together. Now, they clearly do not like one another, although there is talk that might just be sort of some kayfabe pro wrestling kind of thing that, maybe they are still friends and they just know how to sell a fight. Either way, it's an interesting matchup. So, In a way, you can break this down as a classic striker versus grappler matchup. Obviously, they're both mixed martial artists. They both have well-rounded skills, but it's no secret that if Colby is going to find an advantage, it's likely going to be on the ground. If Jorge's going to find an advantage, it's likely going to be in the striking. One thing that I noticed while doing the tape on Colby is I think he's a fighter that this is probably true for any fighter, but I think confidence plays a really big role in how Colby performs. And I think his confidence can sort of wax and wane throughout a fight based on how things are going. When he fought Jorge Masvidal, I think he was pretty cautious a lot of the time, which makes perfect sense. He knew he was fighting the best fighter in the world. You want to be confident as a fighter, but you also need to be realistic about what you're up against and be cautious in a situation like that. So Colby was kind of cautious about pulling the trigger for a lot of that fight. I'm talking about the second Usman fight now. But then in round 3, he took Usman down and landed some shots, and then you could see a difference in his confidence and in his approach when he came out for round 4. You could tell that he realized, kind of Bisping says this a lot on the commentary. Bisping will say, or DC says it too, where he'll say, he needs to land something and get the respect, that kind of thing. In this way, it was, in this case, it wasn't Colby landing something to make Usman respect him. It was Colby landing something so that Colby could get the respect in himself and the confidence and feeling like, okay, I'm in this fight, I can do this. And the reason that I felt like that was worth bringing up is because I don't know how cautious Colby is going to be against Jorge Masvidal. And I don't mean he's going to come out and do something stupid or not be taking the fight seriously, but it was clear against Usman that he knew he was fighting the best fighter in the world, and he knew he needed to be cautious, and he knew he was in for a battle. Colby has repeatedly said that he believes Jorge Masvidal is a journeyman, that he believes Jorge Masvidal is not on his level. And, that could all be kayfabe. It could be just kind of shit talking to build up the fight. But I personally think that Colby believes that. I think that Colby feels that Jorge Masvidal is not on his level. I think he feels that Jorge Masvidal is a journeyman fighter. And I think he wants to come out here and prove, look, this guy's not on my level. I am levels above him, and I'm going to show that in this fight. I feel like Colby wants to come out and put on that kind of performance. What kind of difference does that make? I don't know, but that's kind of how I feel that Colby is feeling about this fight. So one thing that I was noticing as I did my research, obviously, Jorge Masvidal was KO'd by in the first Usman fight, went to decision if I remember correctly. The second one, Masvidal was KO'd early. Other than that finish in the second Usman fight, you have to go all the way back to 2009 to find the last time that Jorge Masvidal was finished in a fight, and it was that really famous inverted triangle with Tobi Imada. If you've been a fan since back then, you probably remember that. It was kind of a big deal when it happened back in 2009. It was kind of, that submission was sort of all over the place. Obviously, Colby is a huge favorite in this fight. Let me see. I've got the odds here. Colby sitting at, he can be had for like minus 310. Comeback on Masvidal like plus 300. I'm hearing people say that those odds are too wide. And, a big part of the argument that I'm seeing for that is simply that, Masvidal's a veteran. This is his 51st professional fight. The guy has seen and done everything. I agree that experience matters. I agree that veteranship matters, but I truly do think Colby Covington is the better fighter. Do I think that he's in a completely different league like Colby himself seems to think? I kind of do, and I don't mean any disrespect to Jorge Masvidal, but I really do think Colby Covington is just a much better fighter than Jorge Masvidal is, at least at this point in their respective careers. Not to mention, he's got a lot of fight miles on him. I think he's 37 years old now. We haven't necessarily seen signs that he's slowing down or that he's deteriorating as a fighter, but we could be seeing those things at any time. We could see those things on Saturday. So, I lean toward thinking because of the reason I brought up that Masvidal hasn't been finished besides against Usman, the best fighter in the world. He hadn't been finished since 2009. Is I was trying to figure out, I do favor Colby to win. Do I think Colby finds a finish here? I don't. I think Colby's going to come out. I think he knows his best path to victory is in the wrestling. I'm hoping, since I do think he wants to prove a point, I'm hoping he's not going to come out and be like, I'm going to knock this guy out to prove that he's not on my level, because that's not the smartest way to approach it. I think if you want to if you want to accidentally prove that Masvidal is on your level, boxing with him for 5 rounds is probably the way to do that, because if Masvidal wins this fight, that's certainly how it's going to happen, is in the striking. I think if I had to choose here, I'm going Colby by decision. I think Colby's going to look to use his wrestling. Obviously, he's got great cardio. He can use his wrestling for 5 rounds without tiring himself out too much. As for best bets, I did put Colby in a parlay, which we'll take a look at all of my bets later on in the show here. But as for some bets I was looking at, I used Colby as a parlay piece. I think I had him at minus 310. Obviously, if you think that line is too wide, you probably wouldn't want to use him as a parlay piece. I kind of think the line is all right myself. It might be a little wide, but it was still okay that I didn't mind using it. Some other things you can look at are Jorge Masvidal by KO in round 1 is at plus 1,500. Do I think that's likely to happen? No. If Masvidal wins, is that one of the ways that it's likely to happen? Yeah, I think so. So at plus 1,500, that might be worth a little sprinkle. I haven't played it, but another is Jorge Masvidal inside the distance at plus 375, or Jorge Masvidal by KO at plus 400. If you're going to play him, you might as well play one of those props, I think. If you play him straight up, you're going to get him at plus 300. Inside the distance is 375. KO is 400. Jorge Masvidal's not going to win a decision here. I think we can probably all agree on that. If Masvidal wins, it's almost certainly going to be inside the distance. So if you like him, take a look at those inside the distance or by KO props, I think. Oh, moving on to our co-main event, Rafael dos Anjos versus Renato Moicano. I have not yet run the tape on Moicano. I had done the tape on Rafael Fiziev, excuse me. I'm always Brazilianizing those R's. I did do the tape on Fiziev, but now that Moicano has been brought in as the replacement, I have not done the tape on that yet. So I can't speak super knowledgeably about this fight, but I can pull up the odds and we'll take a look at that. Rafael dos Anjos is a favorite at minus 170 with the comeback on Moicano at plus 155. I don't mind a bet on dos Anjos. Mind you, this is based on, having not done any tape study, but I don't mind a shot on dos Anjos at minus 170 or even using him as a parlay piece. I would probably favor dos Anjos over Moicano anyway, and then you bring in the short notice nature of the fight, and again, like I said, not based in any tape study. This is just kind of throwing that out there, but I'm going to do the tape study still probably tomorrow, but I may end up using dos Anjos as a parlay piece. We'll see on that. Next fight, man, I think I'm going to call this one my people's main event. I think this is a fascinating matchup. Edson Barboza versus Bryce Mitchell. I said Covington and Masvidal was a striker versus grappler matchup. This is a pure, again, they're mixed martial artists, but yeah, this is about as close to a pure striker versus grappler matchup as you'll find in the sport anymore these days, really. I mean, Barboza is an absolutely killer kickboxer, very dangerous anywhere on the feet at any point in the fight. And Bryce Mitchell is equally dangerous on the ground, honestly. And Barboza has, he maybe not the greatest subs himself, but he has great sub defense. He has pretty good takedown defense. He has a great get-up game. Bryce Mitchell's striking is coming along. He's not a fantastic striker, but he's pretty good at using his punches to get inside and set up takedowns. So, they've got the spots where they butter their bread, but they're well-rounded enough mixed martial artists in their own right as well. So looking at this fight, some of the things that I thought were worth pointing out, Barboza has 78% takedown defense, and he does have a pretty good ability and desire to scramble out of bad positions when grappling does start happening. And what I mean by, sometimes it's not just about the ability, it's about the desire, because some fighters just kind of tend to sort of they even sort of accept takedowns. They might fight it a little bit and eventually feel like, he's got me. And then once they're on their back, they kind of accept that position and that sort of thing. Barboza doesn't really do that. When he feels that someone's getting a takedown, or they end up just kind of scrambling into a ground fighting type of position, he's pretty good at staying active, staying busy, understanding the position he's in, understanding whether it's somewhere he wants to be or not, and if it's not, how is he going to get it to where it is. He's pretty good at that sort of thing. It's also worth noting that Bryce Mitchell hasn't fought in a year and a half, and that was because I believe he broke his hand in the Andre Fili fight, so he's been out for a while. As far as some stats, Mitchell averages 3.26 takedowns per 15-minute fight with only 46% takedown accuracy. So that doesn't sound like a great stat, but I'm not sure how they measure those stats exactly, especially when it comes to chain wrestling. I'm not sure what they consider a successful takedown and not a successful takedown. And if you shoot in and chain together 5 takedown attempts and you finally get it on the last one, does that count as 4 missed takedowns? And I don't know how that works, because it says 46% takedown accuracy for Bryce Mitchell, but if you watch him, he is pretty tenacious about going for his takedowns, and he does get them a lot of the time. He's willing to chain things together and be relentless and keep working for that takedown until he gets it. There are moments, some of the things that concern me, there are moments in the Andre Fili fight, especially in round 2, where Bryce Mitchell is getting tagged up pretty bad. He is taking some shots. And, you can't really take those kind of shots from Edson Barboza. So we do see some moments there where Mitchell does appear pretty hittable. And Barboza's the kind of guy that if he's able to start tagging you up and start hurting you, it can spell disaster pretty quickly. So if Mitchell does have a hard time getting Barboza down, if he is able to get him down, but Barboza is able to get back up again, it could turn into a world of hurt for Bryce Mitchell pretty quickly. Let's see, if you count amateur fights, sorry, I'm reading my notes here. If you count amateur fights, Bryce Mitchell lost his debut, and then he won 10 fights in a row by submission. Obviously, this was against really low-level competition, but I still thought that was worth talking about. At the UFC level, he has 5 wins, but only one of them is by submission. The other 4 are by decision. So I think that he has a reputation as being this venomous grappler that's getting submissions. He is a venomous grappler, but I think it's worth noting that of his 5 UFC fights, he's won all of them, but he's only submitted one opponent so far. So he got lots of submissions in the lower level competition, against lower level competition, but now that he's at the UFC level, he has not been finding the submissions. Another thing I thought was worth noting, Edson Barboza has 16 UFC wins, and 4 of them, a full 25%, are round 3 finishes. I'm getting to something with this because I got props I'm looking at. So my book actually doesn't have props for this fight at the moment, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on it and hoping that it does, because I kind of favor, if I have to make a pick here, I kind of favor Bryce Mitchell to win by decision. I think he will probably be able to relentlessly work for those takedowns, and even if he can't keep Barboza down, I think he'll be relentless and continue working for the takedowns. It only takes one with Barboza, but I do lean Bryce Mitchell to win by decision. I just had to pick something. I really don't feel like I have a strong read either way on this fight. But as far as the bets that I was looking at, I haven't placed any bets on this fight. I actually don't mind the Edson Barboza money line at plus 140. I mean, I think anytime you're getting a guy like Edson Barboza with his level of experience and his skill set against especially a guy who's still somewhat green in his career. I mean, I think Mitchell has 14 professional fights. So, I mean, that's not super green, but he's still a young guy, still fairly new to the UFC. Barboza is by far the best fighter he will have ever fought. So I think anytime you're able to get some plus money on that, it's at least worth a look. But some other ones that I'd really like to look at, if my book does end up offering them, are props for Edson Barboza by KO in round 2 and Edson Barboza by KO in round 3. If there's decent numbers on those, which I think there will be, especially since Barboza is the underdog here, I'll probably be taking some sprinkles on those. So if you don't yet follow me on Twitter, make sure to do that. Erik Bets Fights on Twitter, because I probably will be adding more bets, and that would be the best place to follow me as far as kind of what I end up doing. Usually I screenshot my entire betting slate and put it up the morning of the fights. So if I do add anything, you'll be able to access it that way on Twitter. All right, next fight, folks. This is another one I'm really fascinated by. Kevin Holland versus Alex Cowboy Oliveira. It's a weird fight. Kevin Holland's coming down to 170 for the first time. That could be good. That could be bad. I don't know. Kevin Holland's a pretty big guy. It's always, you're never quite sure what you're going to get when somebody's cutting weight for the first time. Obviously, it's gonna help him because he's going to have a size advantage. But is it going to deplete him? How's he going to handle the weight cut? That kind of thing. I mean, I don't have any specific concerns there, but you just never know. Some people don't end up handling those cuts particularly well. I know Kevin Holland has been working on his wrestling. He's been working on his sprawl, on his defensive wrestling. So, ideally it will be getting better. But based on what we're able to see, based on the tape that we have and not just guessing on the work that he's doing and how much that's going to make a difference, Kevin Holland is not a good wrestler. He does not fight off takedowns very well. Once he gets on the ground, I mean, he is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so maybe he's one of those guys that believes that working off his back he's going to get subs. I don't know, because he doesn't, so I don't know why he would believe that. But he is one of those guys who kind of accepts bottom position once he's there, and most fighters who do that shouldn't. I mean, there are a handful of fighters out there who have that really dangerous, venomous guard game off their back, but it's not 1994 anymore. That doesn't work a lot of the time, and I'm not disparaging jiu-jitsu at all. I love jiu-jitsu. I'm just saying, when you're working within the confines of the rules of mixed martial arts, where you only have a 5-minute round to work with, by the time you end up on the ground on your back and there's 3 minutes left, 2 minutes left, or whatever, most of the time trying to work off your back and get a submission from there is not going to be your best bet. It just isn't, because because if you don't find it, then you've just lost those minutes on your back. So anyway, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I'm kind of just blabbing at this point, but okay. So we talked a little bit about how Kevin Holland is not a good defensive wrestler or offensive wrestler and tends to accept being put on his back. Cowboy Oliveira is not a great wrestler either, but he's a serviceable wrestler. He has 2.27 takedowns per 15 minutes. That's his average. He only has 37% takedown accuracy, so not great. Holland has 50% takedown defense. That said, if this fight stays on the feet, I think it's probably Holland all day. Holland is the bigger guy. He's got more output. He's got a longer reach. He's got better cardio. Cowboy's got some crack on his punches too, but he's got that 4.5-inch reach advantage. If Cowboy does choose to focus on wrestling, it's so hard to know what to say about this fight, because one thing that I say a lot is, as handicappers, what we need to do is we never want to bet on what a fighter is capable of doing. We want to bet on what a fighter is likely to do. There's lots of times where you think, if this fighter just decides to use their wrestling, they'll absolutely dominate here. But then they just don't use their wrestling. Somebody like Jennifer Maia comes to mind. Somebody like George Gurgel back in the day, how he was excellent jiu-jitsu player, but he fell in love with his hands and became a boxer for the rest of his career, even though once he got people on the ground, it was over. Those kinds of fighters where you just can't trust them to actually fight to their best win condition. That's Cowboy all day. And I think it's because Cowboy Oliveira, he just doesn't care that much about winning fights, I don't think. I'm sure he wants to win, but when it comes right down to it, Cowboy Oliveira is an entertainer. The guy likes to have fun. The guy likes to make sure the crowd's having fun. I mean, he likes to dance his way out to the octagon, and he's just kind of goofing around and having fun. And what I'm getting at is this. If Cowboy Oliveira came into this fight and we could 100% trust that he was going to fight to his best win condition, I think he wins this fight. I would maybe even slightly favor him to win this fight. Did I pull up I don't think I pulled up the odds here. Let's talk about that quick. Alex Oliveira, he's a plus 270 underdog, so pretty big underdog, with Kevin Holland being minus 278, even up to a minus 300 favorite in spots. So Oliveira's a pretty big underdog. And what I'm saying is, I would almost lean toward favoring him if I could trust that he was going to come out and his priority would be winning this fight rather than just having fun and putting on a show. Because I think if Oliveira, unless Kevin Holland's takedown defense and defensive wrestling really has improved a lot, I think Oliveira could get the takedowns here. I think he could wrestle his way to a decision. There's a concern with him tiring himself out. He doesn't have the greatest cardio. But, you know, the idea that wrestling tires you out, I think that comes into play a lot more when you're having to do it repeatedly. I think that comes into play a lot more when you take an opponent down and that opponent is able to get back up again, and you have to take him down again and get back up again. Kevin Holland doesn't really do that. You know, this could be a situation where if Oliveira is able to get one takedown per round, that might be all he needs. Is that enough to tire out Cowboy? It might be. It might be. So that is a legitimate concern. But yeah, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to say for my official pick here, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it, you guys. I am officially going to pick Cowboy Oliveira to win this fight by decision. I'm not saying you should tail that in any of your little pick'em games or anything like that, but I'm going for it. Do I believe that? Not necessarily, but that's I'm putting my vote where my heart is a little bit there. But as far as the best bets here, I know some people are parlaying Kevin Holland. You know, if you think Kevin Holland's going to win, go for it. Parlay him. I think that the line is too wide, personally. I wouldn't trust Kevin Holland at, what was he at, minus 300? I know I just looked at it. Yeah, up as high as like minus 300. I wouldn't trust Kevin Holland at that number, personally. I did actually bet. I put 1 unit on Cowboy Oliveira's money line. I think I got him at plus 240. I think he's up even higher than that now, plus 270. Or you can get Cowboy Oliveira by decision at plus 450. I don't mind a shot at either of those. Am I confident they're going to hit? Certainly not. But I think that there is potentially some value in those lines. I'm excited for that fight. It's going to be a sweaty one. I just hope Oliveira comes out and actually wants to win the fight instead of just have some fun. But we'll see. Next up on the docket, we've got Sergey Spivak versus Greg Hardy at heavyweight. What are our betting lines here? We've got Spivak as the favorite at minus 200. Comeback on Greg Hardy as the underdog at plus 185. So, Greg Hardy. What do you say about Greg Hardy? Greg Hardy is able to compete at the UFC level because he's a super athlete and because he's a heavyweight. Greg Hardy wouldn't be able to compete at the UFC level in any other weight class, because in any other weight class, you truly have to be a skilled and well-rounded martial artist in order to compete at the UFC level. At heavyweight, you can be a big, strong, athletic dude with some very basic skills, and that can be enough to do it. I mean, you know, look back to dudes like Brendan Schaub and Matt Mitrione, you know, people who, or even Herschel Walker. He didn't fight in the UFC, but he did fight MMA. If you're a big, strong, athletic guy, especially when you're younger and you're in your athletic prime and you're able to pick up skills really quickly, you can become a heavyweight mixed martial artist at the highest level even. Anyway, my point being that Greg Hardy, by knockout in round 1, is always on the table in any fight that he's in, simply because he is a big, powerful guy who's going to come out throwing big hands and try to take you out. He becomes a whole lot less dangerous after the first round. So, I mean, if you're going to bet Greg Hardy in this fight, or any fight really, you bet him by KO in round 1. I actually did sprinkle him already by KO in round 1. I got it at plus 550. Because if I remember correctly, the implied probability at plus 550 is 15%. So I got to thinking, if Greg Hardy and Sergey Spivak fight 100 times, does Greg Hardy win that fight by knockout in round 1 more than 15 times? And I asked a buddy of mine what he thought about it too, a friend of mine who's an MMA fan. And he was like, I think that outcome might happen closer to 25% of the time. And I was like, yeah, I think it's a little bit more likely than 15% as well. So I went ahead and sprinkled 0.2 units on Greg Hardy by KO in round 1 at plus 550. That said, I haven't really given much of a breakdown in this fight. I guess really that is my breakdown. Greg Hardy is dangerous against anyone in round 1. And if you can just hang on into round 2, he is much less dangerous at that point. Sergey Spivak is reasonably well-rounded. He's a guy he's got okay striking. He can hold his own on his feet. He's not going to want to go toe-to-toe with Hardy in round 1. I mean, there's no doubt at all that Sergey Spivak is going to be looking to get this to the ground with a quickness. I mean, that is the only way Greg Hardy's going to win here is throwing that big bolo and finding the KO. Spivak is a serviceable wrestler and a pretty decent grappler, and even though he can strike, he's not going to want to do that here. So we're going to see Sergey come out and probably try to get the takedown very quickly, I would think. Greg Hardy is not necessarily a good defensive wrestler, technically speaking, but early in the fight, when he still has his energy and his athleticism and his explosiveness, he can be pretty tough to take down. Obviously, if you're able to find a quick, like, reactionary double, like a reactive type takedown where he's off balance and he's coming in with a punch or something like that, those reactive takedowns where you're just timing it exactly right and it just takes somebody right off their feet, no problem. That if you can time it perfectly and do that to Greg Hardy, you can get him down without it being a problem. If you're going to try to do the more grimy, getting him up against the cage, trying to lock your hands around his hips and working, trying to find a trip, that sort of thing, I think you're going to have a little more trouble there simply because he is so strong and so athletic. But at the same time, that's exactly the kind of thing that you're going to want to do to tire him out, to get the blood flowing in his arms, get his muscles wore out, take some of that pop off of his punches. So, one way or another, I think we're going to see Sergey Spivak try to get this fight to the ground early. This could be a great live betting spot because, there's a good shot that Greg Hardy's going to have a good round 1, that he's going to look impressive in round 1. And, if he wins round 1 pretty handily, but we go into round 2, you're probably going to get a pretty big number on Sergey Spivak in round 2. And once we get out of round 1, traditionally Greg Hardy just isn't that dangerous anymore. So I think that a live bet on Sergey Spivak later in the fight is probably a good way to look at it. Oh, next fight on the card. This is another banger. This is a good one. This is a pretty good card, man. There's some fun stuff on here. Oh, I didn't even mention this. I'm actually going to the event on Saturday. I live in Vegas. Some of you watching probably know that, but some of you might not. But a buddy of mine, Leo, sent me a message and said, "Hey, I got a friend who's selling a ticket. Do you want to go?" And I was like, maybe if it's affordable, and it was. So I pulled the trigger, and I'm still going to do the live best bet show on DFS by the numbers an hour before the prelims. So that means I'll be in the car during the first fight probably. My wife's going to drop me off. So I'm going to do the show. As soon as the show's over, I'm hopping in the car. I'm going to be in the car watching the prelims on my phone probably as my wife drives me down to T-Mobile. But anyway, enough about that. Next fight is Jalen Turner versus Jamie Mullarkey. I think this is a cool fight. These guys are both action fighters, both finishers. They've I think Turner has finished his last 2 opponents and Mullarkey's finished his last 3, or it might be the other way around. I'm gonna have to look at my notes a little bit here, but okay, there are a few kind of stats I wanted to share with you here. In 23 total fights, that's between pro and amateur, Jalen Turner has gone to decision only 3 times, and he lost all 3 of those. So he's never won by decision. In 19 total fights, again, that's between pro and amateur, Jamie Mullarkey has gone to decision 4 times, and he lost 3 of them. 2 of those decisions, both of which he lost, have come in his last 4 fights. So he's struggled against the higher level UFC competition. Only one of Turner's decision losses was at the UFC level, and that was his fight with Matt Frivola in 2019. Sometimes I don't know where I'm going with these stats exactly. I just kind of type up things that I find interesting and decide that I want to share them with you. But so the data would suggest that this fight ends inside the distance. I kept having this weird sneaking suspicion that it doesn't, simply because you know how sometimes, I mean, these guys are both bangers. They're both athletic. They both come out looking to get after it and strike hard. They're both dynamic fighters with a lot of movement. They've tended to finish people, especially at the lower level. They've also both finished people at the UFC level. But sometimes when you have two fighters whose skill sets and athleticism are like pretty comparable, they end up just kind of canceling each other out a little bit. This is not a very scientific explanation or even a very scientific way of approaching this, but sometimes you just get a weird feeling that this is one of those spots, and I keep getting that feeling that this is one of those spots where even though these guys are finishers, they're going to cancel each other out here, and they're going to be too evenly matched, and it's going to go to decision. I don't know, but that's kind of something I keep coming back to as I look at everything here. But and based on that, I kept thinking, like, part of me kept wanting to bet Jamie Malarkey by decision. We have seen Jalen Turner slow down a little bit. I don't know. So I start getting into territory where I'm sort of, guessing, throwing darts and guessing a little bit here. So I don't want to get too far into that. But Jamie Malarkey by decision is at plus 475, which is an implied probability of 17%. Just something to look at. I didn't bet that. The over 1.5 is at minus 145, or an implied probability of 59%. I did put a bet on that. I do think that this fight goes over 1.5. Yeah, either of these guys is live for a finish at any time. In fact, one prop that I wrote down here, Jalen Turner has won his last two fights by rear naked choke. You can get Jalen Turner by sub at plus 500. He's not even specifically known as a jiu-jitsu guy, but obviously that's something he's been working on. And like I said, he's won his last two fights in a row by submission. So definitely something to look at here is that Jalen Turner by sub at plus 500. I have not played it. I probably won't play it, but I thought it was worth a look. And then, like I said, I did bet the over 1.5 here. I think I put a unit and a half on that at minus 145. Next fight up, we've got Marina Rodriguez versus Yan Xiaonan. My read on this fight is pretty similar to what I was thinking about Diana Belbita versus Gloria DePaula a couple weeks back. I think Marina Rodriguez probably hits harder. She's the more physical fighter. She can be a little bit of a bully in there, that kind of thing. I think Rodriguez is the kind of fighter that when she lands, a lot of times it's gonna knock the opponent's head back. It's gonna look good to the judges. You're gonna be able to tell that there's some impact there. That said, I think Yan Xiaonan is quicker than Marina Rodriguez. I think she throws faster strikes. I think she moves more quickly. I think she has better footwork and better athleticism. I think she throws those straight, snappy, quick punches. They both put out pretty good volume. After I did the tape on this fight, I ended up feeling like, because what I always do, I do the tape without knowing what the odds are, and then I set my own odds. I type up kind of my breakdown. I set my own odds, and then I compare that to the real odds, and that's how I decide if it's worth a bet or not, if I'm seeing value based on what I think the odds should be versus what the odds are. Anyway, after doing the tape, I was thinking the fight was pretty close to a coin flip, but if I had to lean one way or the other, I was actually leaning Yan Xiaonan. I was willing to consider Yan Xiaonan like a very small favorite, maybe 55%, if even that, But when I pulled it up and saw that she was at plus 240 with an implied probability of 29%, that was an auto bet for me. In fact, I put 2 units on it. I think there's a lot of value there. I think this fight could play out really closely. I think, like I said, I think that Rodriguez could be landing the harder shots, but I think Yan could be landing more shots, could be having the better movement, that sort of thing. I don't know. It's a close fight, but to me the odds feel off, so that was worth a bet. One thing I was thinking, and one thing I put in my notes here, I think it would actually be wise for Marina Rodriguez to potentially look to grapple here. I don't think she will. That's just not her game, but that's one thing I was thinking as I was watching the tape is like, since it is a fight that could play out closely on the feet, I think she could make it swing more likely in her favor by wrestling, but I don't think she will. Next up, Nick Negumereanu versus Kennedy Nzechukwu. I never know if I'm saying that name right. Nzechukwu. I spelled both of these guys' names correctly without looking today, so I was pretty proud of that. I thought that was that was worth noting. It's so hard to know what to say about Kennedy. He's such an uneven fighter. Like, he just seems like a guy who's got a lot going for him. I mean, he's 6'5" at light heavyweight, huge guy, long reach. I wouldn't say that he's super athletic, at least compared to what guys with his body type often are. You know, I don't think he's as athletic as like a John Jones or an Anderson Silva. You know, he's got that long kind of lanky, wiry, strong frame, but I don't think he's a super athlete necessarily. I think he's more athletic than Nick Negomereanu, most likely, but Kennedy is so uneven. I mean, he's capable of having moments in the cage that are really impressive. He's capable of he seems like somebody who has all the potential in the world, and yet he just can't seem to put it together. And the thing is, really, he's pretty young in the sport. He's only 9-2. And shout out to Punchlist MMA podcast for this, because I was just listening to them, and I think it was Trey that pointed this out. So Kennedy had one amateur fight against an 0-0 opponent. Then he had a professional fight against an opponent who was 9-9. Another professional fight against an 0-0 opponent. And then he fought in the Contender Series. So he had literally fought 3 times against, and 2 of the opponents he fought were debuting fighters, and then fought against somebody with a 500 record, and then he was on the Contender Series. And, you know, they signed him to one of those developmental deals, so he didn't go straight into the UFC. But he fought in XKO. This is his first fight after the Contender Series. He fought in XKO against Andre Kavanagh, who has a 7-13 record. So some experience, but not a great record, obviously. And then fought Corey Johnson in LFA. Corey Johnson was 0-0. Then fights on the Contender Series again against Dennis Bryant, who is 5-1, wins that in round 1. Then comes into the UFC against Paul Craig. So before fighting Paul Craig in the UFC, Kennedy had fought, and I'm including his amateur fight here, he had fought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And those 7 fighters had a total of 18, 28, 29, 34, about 40 fights between them, which I guess isn't that bad, but that's really Andre Kavanagh with 20 fights. Half of it's right there. So he's got 3 or 4 different opponents in there that are 0-0. So I think what we're likely seeing is probably a guy who does still have the potential that we've seen in him. Also, how old is he? Let me take a look. He's 29. So, I mean, not super young, but, you know, probably just coming into his prime or about to come into his prime. So, you know, maybe we still do see something more from the guy, you know, like just because he doesn't seem like he's living up to that potential doesn't mean that he still won't, you know. That's what I'm saying is he still could, but you know, we've seen such uneven performances from him. That Daun Jung performance, I mean, who knows what the explanation for that is, but it was just very strange. He came out just shelled up the whole time. I mean, he did the same thing in the Ulberg fight, but then eventually he was able to survive into the second round, and then kind of came alive and was able to find the finish. But in the Daun Jung fight, he just didn't do anything. He just shelled up. He had that guard going on, and Daun Jung just started landing punches and then landing elbows, and then the fight was over, and it was just like, what the hell was that? So, you know, after watching the tape on this fight, I wasn't sure what to think. Because, okay, Nick Negomereanu, he's not very technical. You know, there's not a lot of depth to his game necessarily. But he hits hard. He's got a hell of a chin. You can't hurt the guy. And he comes forward throwing hard punches. You know, I mean, he's a guy that just, he wades right through. He blocks punches with his face. He has no interest in defending himself because he knows he can take those shots. So he's a guy who is willing to just wade right into the pocket, come right into the phone booth. He does not care if your fist is bouncing off of his jaw just as long as his fist is bouncing off of yours. You know, he doesn't care. And so even though Kennedy is the much bigger guy, has the much bigger reach, I mean, Kennedy has things going for him here that if you could trust him to use those things, I would favor him to win this fight. Kind of like I was saying about Cowboy Oliveira. But again, we have to come back to We don't handicap fights based on what a fighter is capable of doing. We handicap it based on what we think they will do. Could Kennedy win this fight? Yes. But I don't think he will. Because Nick Negumereanu isn't going anywhere. He's going to come forward throwing those shots. Kennedy's going to do his thing where he shells up, and is he going to, against a guy like Negumereanu who's not going to tire out and is just going to keep coming with those shots, what's Kennedy going to do? I don't know. Not a very technical breakdown, I know, but I typed up a bunch of notes on this fight and I couldn't figure out where to go with it. But then once I thought about that, like, Negumereanu's not going anywhere, and Kennedy is a guy who is capable. He's capable of completely falling apart, and just having a completely abysmal performance. And so, getting plus money on Nick Negumereanu, he's at plus 120. Getting plus money on the guy that we know is going to come out there and at least put it on, versus a guy who is likely to just kind of fold, to just take his ball and go home. Yeah, I decided that was worth a shot. So I did put a bet on Nick Negumereanu at plus 120. Mostly just not based on like super technical micro breakdown here or anything, just based on we don't know what Kennedy's going to do. He might fall apart, and Nick Negumereanu won't. So there you go. You come here for the deep technical breakdowns, right? I hope not, because that's not what I'm giving you. Oh, next up we've got Marina Moroz versus Maria Agapova. That's right. I keep making sure I say that right. Agapova. Man, I love Maria Agapova. How can you not? I don't know. She's a polarizing figure, I guess, so maybe some people don't, but she's a character, I mean, if you spend any time reading about who she is in the training room and who she is in her personal life, she might not be the greatest human being in the world, but at least she's interesting. She's a character. The way she is in the cage, she is coming out to kill you. She is coming out to end the fight. We don't see a lot of finishes in women's MMA. We don't see a lot of fighters who are able to come out and really just put it on somebody and get them out of there. And Agapova is a fighter who can do that. I'm just going to look at some of the notes I typed up here. Agapova is more powerful, more physical, meaner, throws more punches, lands more punches. I mean, these are all the reasons that I think she should be favored. I do have to say, admittedly, Agapova's loss to Shanna Dobson, I think it's Shanna. Her loss to Shanna Dobson is concerning. And that was only, I think 2 fights ago. Because Shanna Dobson probably isn't UFC caliber in the first place. She's got like a 4-5 record. I think Agapova is the only fight she won in the UFC, so she's not very good. And Maria Agapova did just lose to her not that long ago. Agapova is a naturally aggressive and kind of wild fighter, but I think that aggression and wildness is part of what led to her losing to Shanna Dobson, because she was just being too aggressive, putting herself out of position, just coming in there, swinging bolos, and it resulted in her ending up in positions she didn't want to be in. So I'm hoping that she's learned from that. So, it's low-level women's MMA. So you don't ever want to get too crazy betting anything with 2 fighters who are at this level. But Agapova is favored here at like minus 190, minus 200 range, I think. I keep forgetting to pull up the odds and look at them. Where is it? Yeah. I guess a little. Yeah, minus 185 to minus 200. Come back in Marina Moroz, plus 175 down to like 160 in spots. And I pretty much agree with that line. I think even though it is low-level women's MMA, I think that Agapova should be favored like that. She's just so much more physical and aggressive and stronger, I think, than Marina Moroz. Marina Moroz is probably more technical, or arguably more technical, but she just doesn't have the physicality and just the meanness, Agapova wants to get you out of there. And even though obviously technique matters, there is something to be said for that. If you've got 2 fighters who are pretty close in technique, and one of them is just plain nasty and likes to get in there and finish people, it's okay to favor that person. I mean, that's a perfectly legitimate trait to be taking into account when capping fights, I think. And Agapova has that in spades. Well, as far as a pick, I'm picking Agapova by decision, or possibly even like a late sub, like finding a rear naked choke potentially later in the fight. If I remember correctly, Marina Moroz has never been finished, I think. So that's something to consider. But also, if you look at the fighters that she's lost to in the UFC, they're not really fighter. I mean, like I said, you don't see a whole lot of finishes in women's MMA, period. But if we look at, I'm pulling up her record here. If we look at Marina Moroz's record in the UFC, she's lost to Angela Hill, Carla Esparza, and Valerie Letourneau. So the fighters she's lost to are not finishers. Generally, if we look at Maria Agapova's record, she's 10-2 overall in the UFC. Even going back to, okay, so she fought Tracy Cortez on the Contender Series. She lost the decision. Then she fought Alexa Connors in Invicta, won by rear naked choke in round 1. Fought Marilia Santos in Invicta, won by ground and pound in round 1. Then makes her UFC debut against Hannah Cifers, wins by rear naked choke in round 1. Then she had that ground and pound loss to Shanna Dobson, which, like I said, is a little concerning. Then her last fight, wins by rear naked choke in round 3 against Sabina Mazo. So we are seeing her get finishes at the UFC level pretty consistently. And a lot of times she's finding the rear naked choke. So even though Marina Moroz has never been finished, I think she's also just never fought a fighter who is a great finisher like Maria Agapova is. So I have not bet this yet, but I think I'm going to. One prop that I was looking at here, Maria Agapova by submission in round 3 at plus 1,700. I'm probably going to end up putting a tiny little like 0.1 or 0.2 unit sprinkle on that just to kind of spice that fight up a little bit. Next fight on the docket, folks, we've got Umar Nurmagomedov versus Brian Kelleher. Umar is a massive favorite here. Last I looked, he was like minus 600. Minus 625. Oh, he's even minus 800 on Betway. I'm looking at some of the other lines here. Kelleher can be had for as high as plus 500. I'm referencing the Punch List MMA podcast again because I was just listening to that moments ago before I came here to do this video. It was interesting to hear those guys break it down. Dale feels like Kelleher is a great bet at plus 500, and Trey feels like even though Kelleher is the veteran and Umar's a younger, newer guy, that Umar's going to walk through Kelleher. I actually lean more toward agreeing with Trey. There is always something to be said for those veteran wiles, for those intangibles that come along with just having experience, having been in every position and knowing what to do in every position and that sort of thing. But there's those intangibles to consider. But I then compare those intangibles to the ones that are in Umar Nurmagomedov's favor, which is that he's 10 years younger, and we're at what, 145 here or 135? I forget. But anyway, in these smaller weight classes, Kelleher is 35 years old. At heavyweight, he'd be a spring chicken. When you're down at 25, 35, 45, when you're 35 years old, you're likely nearing the end of your career. You're gonna, if you haven't already started to run into very specific ways in which your game is deteriorating, your speed, your reaction time, some of that sort of thing. If you haven't yet run into those things deteriorating, you're going to very soon, almost certainly. So Umar Nurmagomedov, I believe, is 25 years old. I keep guessing here rather than just pulling it up because I don't want you guys to have to wait for me while I pull crap up on my computer here. But so yeah, Umar Nurmagomedov, he's 26 years old, and he's 13-0. Brian Kelleher is 35 years old, and he's 24-12. So obviously he's got a lot of experience, but these guys are both guys who are pretty well rounded. You know, I would say, like Kelleher, I would say that he's not really a specialist. He's more of a generalist. He can strike, he can wrestle, he can grapple. Umar Nurmagomedov as well. He can strike, he can wrestle, he can grapple. But this is one of those spots where Umar is bigger, he's younger, he's more athletic. So the things that Kelleher has going for him are the experience that that old man experience, kind of like we see with Jim Miller. Jim Miller keeps taking on the young up and coming studs, and Jim Miller keeps getting them out of there. So this is one of those spots where, you know, I can understand that take, that like it's that same kind of thing. Umar Nurmagomedov's coming in there, the new hot shot guy, and he's going to take on the old stud in Brian Kelleher. But I just think I think Umar is Brian Kelleher 10.0. I think he has the same skills, but just like amped up in literally every area. I think Umar Nurmagomedov is, if you took Brian Kelleher 10 years ago and then made him twice as good, I guess. Let's see, looking at some of the notes I've got here. Kelleher has been submitted I think 5 times, but the last time was in 2018. Only 6 of Umar's 13 wins are submissions and 6 are decisions. But most of those were against pretty good competition. I was kind of leaning toward, even though Kelleher hasn't been, he's been submitted 5 times in what he's got, 30, 40 fights or something like that. And it's been a long time since he's been submitted, but I was leaning toward thinking Umar might find a rear naked choke here late in the fight. I was looking at Umar Nurmagomedov. If I have to make a pick here, I'm going to say Umar, possibly by decision, but I'm going to be bold and say Umar Nurmagomedov by submission, which was also a prop that I was interested in looking at, but it wasn't available at the time when I was typing these notes up. But we're going to take a look right now and see if it is, because I know more props have been posted since I put these notes up. Oh, that's right. Okay. They only have goes the distance on BetOnline. Yes, goes the distance is 135. Does not go the distance is plus 105. All right. That's not really something I'm interested in messing with right now. So next up is Tim Elliott versus Tagir Ulanbekov. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. This is, maybe I'm going to eat these words, but the first thing I typed in my notes here, I said, to be honest, I'm not super impressed with Ulanbekov, or at least not as impressed as some people seem to be. He's a relentless grappler. He maintains control pretty well on the ground. What I got from the tape I watched, and I didn't go back super far, I didn't watch a ton, but what I got from the tape I watched is that he can be a little bit of a wild and loose striker. He's not a super disciplined, keep it tight, choose your shots. He can get a little bit wild on the feet. He can be a little bit wild on the ground too, but he keeps it pretty tight, and he's pretty good at controlling people on the ground. He's not especially potent or dangerous. He also seems pretty hittable on the feet. Tim Elliott, of course, we all know Tim Elliott. He's been around forever. He's had some great performances and some not so great performances. He's a guy who has a lot of skills, but he's also a guy who just has a really unorthodox approach. He gets a little crazy in there. He doesn't really keep a guard up. He keeps his hands down. He kind of leans over. He kind of, almost like some Bobby Green kind of stuff. He gets a little weird in there, gets a little loosey-goosey. A little bit like I said with Cowboy Oliveira, it almost seems at times like Tim Elliott is not keeping his eye on the prize. It almost seems like he's not always trying to win the fight. Sometimes he's just kind of goofing around, I guess. I don't know what to call it exactly, but let's see, what were some of the other things I wanted to say here. Also Tim Elliott is 35 years old, I think is what, hopefully I got that right. And here we're at 125 pounds, so we're down even smaller. Like I said, 35 is no bueno, especially at 125 pounds. So this is a spot. I forgot to pull up the odds here. Sorry guys, I'm all over the place. Tim Elliott is a pretty big underdog at plus 205. Tagir Ulanbekov, a pretty big favorite at minus 225. So what I put in my notes here, I said, I think this could be a winnable fight for Elliott, but I don't know how much I trust him at this point. It's kind of the same thing with Cowboy. Like, if Tim Elliott really came in here with a solid game plan and was going to have a really buttoned up approach and really keep his eye on the prize, I'm going to do what I need to do to win this fight, he probably could, but I don't trust him to do it. I ended up, as far as a pick, I ended up leaning Tagir Ulanbekov by decision, but I don't really have any interest in betting this fight. if I had to pick a bet here, one thing I was looking at was Tagiru Ulanbekov by decision at plus 125. That way you're turning, a pretty big favorite into a small underdog. Tim Elliott's a tough guy, and Tagir he's not a super potent or dangerous fighter, so I think there's a decent chance that it goes to decision and Tagir gets his hand raised that way. Next up, Ludovic Klein versus Devontae Smith. This was one where I kind of had trouble figuring out a good read here as well. I'm actually just going to cop out and read some of my notes here. Klein is the better technical striker, but Smith has athletic gifts that are hard to overcome. Like I said, Klein is sharp and technical, but he can be too patient, and he doesn't always let his strikes go when he should. I think a dirty, brawling style could be something that makes Klein uncomfortable. Smith doesn't really bring that kind of style. And in fact, my read on Devontae Smith was he can actually be kind of rote and predictable with his striking. He kind of throws the same, paw on the jab out there, throws the 1-2. I think he can be a little predictable, and I think a good way to get to throw a kind of a more buttoned up striker like Klein off his game is to get in his face, get dirty, turn it into a brawl. And I don't think Devontae Smith is going to do that. That's just not really his game. Let's see. I think Smith's reach and athleticism are something we need to take into account here. One thing that's interesting, Klein has never been finished by strikes in 21 pro fights. Smith has been finished by strikes in 2 of his last 3 fights. Klein has lost his last 2, but before that he won 4 in a row by strikes, and that was against pretty decent competition. Sometimes I'm just reading my notes to you. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I take the time to look up these stats and type them up, so I figure I might as well share them with you guys. Otherwise, why do I even have them here? But it's not a confident read at all, but in the way of a pick, I ended up picking Smith to win by KO. I don't feel good about that. I didn't feel like I had a strong read on this fight necessarily. By way of a bet, I wasn't really interested in picking a side here. Once again, I forgot to give you the odds, I think. Fairly close. Devontae Smith, decent size favorite, I guess. He's a minus 164. Come back on Ludovic Klein is plus 150. Now that I'm looking at those numbers, and Klein is plus 150. Yeah, if I was going to bet a side, I would bet Klein here. I'd bet the underdog here, I think. But one bet that I was kind of interested in is fight doesn't go the distance on this one. Last I looked, my book didn't have that prop, but let me take a look. No, they don't have any. There's no BetOnline doesn't appear to have any props for this fight put out yet. Nothing there. So yeah, I don't know. If I was going to bet a side, I'd probably bet Klein as the underdog actually. But I'm staying away from that one. If props do come out on it, I'll be looking at the fight doesn't go the distance because I think there's a good chance one of these guys knocks the other one out. But nothing that I'm loving there, at least from what's available so far. And finally, this is the fight that I will be watching on my phone as my wife drives me to the T-Mobile Arena on Saturday. Which is a bummer that I'm not going to be there for it because this should be a banger. Dustin Jacoby versus Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. Oleksiejczuk was the name where I finally did have to give in and look up how to spell it, even after spelling Kennedy and Jaku and some of those other names correctly. Anyway, Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, the guy is a baller. He's a G. I mean, he literally is in the frame of like a welterweight. At middleweight for sure, but possibly even, he does carry a little bit of pudge on him. I think the guy could make 170 pounds if he I'm almost certain he could, in fact, if he got with the right nutritionist and trainer and that sort of thing. But anyway, even though he's that small of a guy, I mean, when you see him out there with any, these proper light heavyweights that are cutting down, by the time they get in the ring, they weigh 220, 225. And Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, he looks so much smaller than everyone he fights. But the guy can bang, he's obviously got the power. He's got the approach. He's not afraid of anyone. I mean, he'll get right in your face and just throw hammers. he's a first round finisher. You know, that's really what he is. Jacoby is a guy who can find finishes, but he's really more of a high level technical finesse type striker that is going to look to outstrike you over 15 minutes. Mikhail is a guy who is just swinging, trying to be first, trying to get you out of there, whereas Jacoby is more of a guy who's he's setting traps. He's trying to bait strikes out of you so he can counter, you know, using some more of those kind of high level techniques rather than just kind of trying to get in your face and finish you like that. Similar to what I just said about Ludovic Klein, the way to beat a guy like Dustin Jacoby is to get in his face, make it dirty, make it grimy, make it a brawl, and make him uncomfortable, which is exactly what Mikhail Oleksiejczuk will do. So I do think that the style that Mikhail Oleksiejczuk brings is an excellent style to beat somebody like Dustin Jacoby. However, I just don't know that in this particular case that it's going to be enough to overcome some of the deficits that Mikhail is naturally working with, specifically just being his size and athleticism. And you know, Jacoby is going to be bigger. He's going to be stronger. He's going to be more technical. He's got all of those things going for him. And also, he's got so much experience as a high-level kickboxer that even though the style that Oleksiejczuk brings is something that might make him more uncomfortable than he's accustomed to being, it's not going to be anything he hasn't seen before. You know, it's not going to be like, oh shit, this guy is coming at me aggressively and I've never had that happen. I don't know what to do. Like he's had, I don't even know how many kickboxing fights in Glory. I think he used to kickbox at the highest level. So, I mean, the guy's kind of seen it all. So that said, you can, there's a prop on Mikhail Oleksiejczuk by KO in round 1, which is at plus 1,000. If he's going to win, that's how he's going to do it. That's his win condition for the most part, is that round 1 KO. If you think he has a decent chance of finding that, a sprinkle on that plus 1,000 makes a lot of sense. However, I think there's a much better chance that Jacoby just has the technical ability, the defense, the footwork, the head movement, the know-how to be able to survive deeper into the fight. And Jacoby is the kind of guy who, with his high-level kickboxing experience, he's going to be able to figure out the timing of Oleksiejczuk. He's going to be able to make those reads, figure out the things that Oleksiejczuk is doing, figure out how to counter those things. You know, over time, just the better technical striker is likely going to take over in a fight like this. If the aggressive sort of onslaught style doesn't get the job done early, it's going to favor the more technical striker down the road. And so I was looking at Dustin Jacoby by decision, and once again, let's pull up the odds here because I forgot to do it. Dustin Jacoby is favored at minus 180, come back on Oleksiejczuk at plus 170. So Jacoby's a minus 180 favorite, and you can get him at plus 210 by taking him by decision, which, here, let me pull up Oleksiejczuk here. Where you at, buddy? Oh yeah, first fight, all the way on the bottom. So we'll take a look at Oleksiejczuk's UFC fights here. I'm gonna go all the way back. Okay, so no contest against Khalil Roundtree. I honestly don't remember what happened in that fight. If you do, go ahead and tell me in the comments. I don't remember. He beats Gian Vellante, punch to the body, round 1. Gadzhimarad Antigulov, uppercut and ground and pound, round 1. Then he loses to Ovince St. Preux, loses to Jimmy Crute. Modestas Bukauskas, he actually did win a split decision there. And then his last fight, Shamil Gamzatov, again, KO in round 1. That, you know, when he wins, that's usually the way he does it. And then, of course, looking at Jacoby here, he gets a decision on the Contender Series. He gets Justin Ledet out of there in round 1, but Justin Ledet is not a very high-level fighter. Goes to decision against Maxime Grishin. Goes to decision against Iwan Kudalaba. He gets Darren Stewart out of there in round 1, and then he goes to decision against John Allen. I think John Allen is, no two fighters are the same, but if we have to draw like a little bit of a parallel, John Allen might be a reasonable parallel for Mikhail Oleksiejczuk in that John Allen is, a little bit smaller. He's smaller than Jacoby, potentially a little bit undersized for the weight class. Not super skilled, but willing to get in there and be aggressive and throw hard. And that fight went to decision. Jacoby wasn't able to get him out of there. So I do lean, by way of a pick, I lean Jacoby to win by decision. And therefore I think that, since he is a minus 180 favorite, getting him at plus 110 to win by decision seems like a pretty decent bet to me. Oh, thanks for hanging with me, folks. I know that I get really rambly and sometimes it seems like I don't know where I'm going with what I'm saying. And I'll tell you a secret about why it seems that way. Because it's true. I really don't know. I just kind of start talking and we see where we end up. Let's go ahead and take a look at all of the bets that I've got for this card so far. And like I said, I will be adding to it most likely. I did put 1 unit on Alex Oliveira at plus 235. I've got 2 units on Yan Xiaonan at plus 240. I've got 2 units on Nick Negumereanu at plus 120. So I've got 5 units right there, all on underdogs. This is a card where I'm either going to win big or lose big, most likely. I'm taking some, and it's not about winning each event. I know based on what I've got out on this event, I know that there's a good chance that I lose on this event. But when you're taking those value spots, when you're taking those underdogs where you say, hey, this line is not right, when you're taking those spots in the long run, theoretically, you will win. So even though there's a decent shot that these bets are going to lose, they're bets where I see value, and so I'm taking it. So I'm making an excuse for myself ahead of time. But anyway, going on with the rest of the bets here. I parlayed Covington and Agapova. I feel pretty confident on that parlay, so I put 2 units on it. I thought about even going 3 or 4 deep on that, but I held off. I did sprinkle 0.2 units on that Hardy wins by TKO in round 1 at plus 550. And then I've also got a unit and a half on Holland Oliveira goes over 1.5 rounds at minus 150. There are some other props. I'm going to be, I'm probably going to sprinkle that Agapova by sub in round 3, and maybe a few other things. So, like I said, folks, do check me out on Twitter, Erik Bets Fights. You're seeing me on YouTube right now, so you already know Erik Bets Fights here. Please give me a like down there. Also, leave me a comment. It really helps me out a lot. It gets the algorithms going if you leave a comment. Leave a comment and say whatever you want. I don't know. Tell me where you disagree with me. Tell me where you agree with me. Tell me which bet I made that was the stupidest one. It was Alex Oliveira, I know. But tell me why it was a stupid bet. Tell me whatever you want. Just leave me a comment. But yeah, do make sure to like and subscribe. I appreciate that very much. Make sure you tune in every Saturday on DFS by the Numbers YouTube channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to that, do that. They put out great content pretty much every single day, I think. But I am part of a show that happens every UFC event day. We start 1 hour before the prelims. So if the prelims are at 4 p.m., we start at 3 p.m. Myself, Brady from DFS by the Numbers, Uncle Wheezy, and Narco Cop. We go through the entire card in that 1 hour. We each give a little bit of a breakdown and share our favorite bet for the card, and we end right as the fights kick off. We do that every single UFC fight day, so it's a really fun way to just kind of stop in. If you feel like getting some last-minute degenerate action before the fights begin, we're going to let you know what our bets are, and you can get those things locked in. So, my throat hurts, so we're going to call it there. Thank you so much for joining me again, folks. I really appreciate all of you who come check out the things that I'm doing, especially if you're hanging out this long, listening to me talk all the way till the end here. I appreciate you very much. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Got to get out of here. Once again, I am Erik with Erik Bets Fights, reminding you to play it smart, play it tight, and let's grow those bankrolls. Let's do it, gang. Thanks so much. Have a great night.